All right, everyone, now it's time to laugh about Jen Psaki and Joe Biden and their messaging with regards to police and crime, because their new strategy is to try to gaslight and lie to people about the entirety of last year, in which in the wake of the George Floyd race riots erupting across the country and dozens of deaths and billions of dollars in property damage, the Democrats took a knee and raised the black power fist and said these are mostly peaceful but fiery protests. They're legitimate. Destroying statues is okay. Burning Wendy's is fine. Culminating with the most surreal meme of last year, I would argue, other than maybe the Chaz Garden, which was the Burning Wendy's, where the CNN crew is out front, fiery but mostly peaceful protest, and then they got attacked by the so-called protesters that had already committed an arson and were vandalizing several buildings behind them. Or even earlier than that, you remember the time that the CNN crew was in, I can't remember which, I think it was Portland at that time, and there were like 5 or 6 burning buildings. It was like burning tires and broken cars and sirens and alarms going off and smoke billowing everywhere. And they're in the middle of a war zone, and they're walking along slowly saying, oh, well, these protests have gotten kind of rowdy. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you fucking chuckle fuck. That's bullshit. But the Democrats, by and large, if not, some of them outright supported it. Some of them literally whipped them into a frenzy, like Maxine Waters, certainly Pelosi's comments at times. Biden grandstanded on this. Now he turns around and he says, well, rioting, this kind of crime has no place in America. We need to heal our wounds. By the way, it was me who was trying to fund the police more. Now, when you look at the proposal, when you're looking at the budgeting at the federal level that Biden is proposing, yes, if you consider the militarized bureaus that be, to their security forces to be police, if you look at the Capitol Police and the feds, and you look at the budget that he proposed, it is larger than the budget that Trump proposed. That is true. So that gets a fact check from me as being true. However, a significant proportion of the overall funds at the federal level, keep this in mind, and this is very important for why this is so misleading, have been diverted into community policing. So social workers to respond to calls. Now, as a libertarian, I look at crime and I say there are a hell of a lot of people that we punish for non-crimes. They possessed drugs. They dealt a little crack or something. Fuck it. If it's between consenting adults, I don't care if they're dealing drugs. Manufacturing drugs. Weapons charges that shouldn't even exist. Jaywalking. Public intoxication. DUI in some cases. You tested positive for THC because 3 days ago you smoked a joint. You tested positive while behind the wheel. That's a big problem. DUI, driving under the influence, loitering. The many laws and regulations that we have, mostly for minor charges. I mean, you're not going to go to Fed for jaywalking. They shouldn't even be considered laws. You could easily reduce the police budget and the prison budget by massive amounts if you were to reform it from that backdrop. The Democrats have it in their heads, though, that the idea is you should throw more money into policing. It's just that instead of the normal beat cops, the ones that are actually capable of defending the property because they have a gun, you send a social worker. Well, it's horseshit. It's not actually going to help these communities. What would help these communities is going in and killing all the drug dealers. But in order to get rid of the drug dealers and not have another wave of them arrive because it's a free market driven underground, you have to end the drug war. The drug war, ultimately, more than any other single thing that the United States is doing, is responsible for the problem. Now, here's the other problem with Biden's claim about being pro-police, because, hey, look, my requested policing budget is a bit larger than Donald Trump's. There are several problems with this. The first is inflation. That is that those numbers represent dollars that are considerably devalued from a year ago. 5% inflation in 1 month. I don't. By the way, what is it for June? Have they even come out with the numbers? Probably significant. It was 4.6 before that. Between 2 months, currency lost arguably about 10% of its value. So if the budget goes up 5-10%, that would kind of make sense now, wouldn't it? That's number one. Number two, those are federal funds. And federal funds disperse to local and state, which is, a drop in the bucket compared to the total. States predominantly take care of their policing. The local beat cops are not feds. The staties are not feds. They're using state resources. The federal government certainly grants money to the states, and the states to the municipalities. But by and large, that's local and state taxation. What the fuck? The police that you're relying upon, if there's a riot, it's not the feds. They have to be bussed in. They have to be sent from elsewhere, or the state guard or something. Even that, of course, the state guard, again, a state apparatus. In part, of course. There's federal funding available because you're talking about people that are training with rocket launchers and shit and tanks. So the idea that he's pro-police while he spent the better part of a year taking the knee and saying that rioters were just protesters and looking at the situation on the ground, by the way, in blue states and in cities, where you have a revolving door system where people are not properly prosecuted for their role in these crimes, that's not pro-police. And it's certainly not a reformist idea. Ignoring the problem and blaming law-abiding gun owners or throwing money at the situation won't work. We've been trying to throw money at the situation in inner cities in the United States now for decades. It has uplifted nobody. What happens is that money gets squandered. If you were to set up community policing, those social workers would end up dealing drugs and raping victims and engaging in crime because they're enabled to. Who do you think's going to take up that job? Okay, I'm going to have to go and talk to the sexual predator. Today I'm going to go talk to several drug dealers. What do you think they're going to end up wrapped up in? Why do you think the inner city metro forces are so fucking goddamn corrupt? Because they're faced with that shit every single day. Of course they do a little drugs. They're probably forced to. The police chief, on day one on the job, police chief says, snort this coke so that you're in it with the rest of us. So that we don't have to worry about you being a snitch. We don't like snitches around here. You're one of the boys now. You're a boy in blue. Here's some weed. Smoke it. You think that doesn't happen in the metro forces? Probably happens with half the state forces in the country. Throwing more money at these people isn't going to help. Get rid of the commissioners. Disband the unions. Fire the officers that aren't doing their job and get new ones in there. Better yet, fire half the metro forces and just have more elected sheriffs. You want them to represent the community? Make more local sheriffs. But that would be a problem. You see, sheriffs have more respect for the Constitution. It's a big, big issue. They're also more efficient. Yeah, tend to be more respectable. There, that's why the Democrats won't do that. I love the insane messaging on it. It is literally a 180 from candidate Biden too. Before he's like, well, I can understand these people's grievances. We need racial justice. We got systemic racism in the country. Please fucking vote for me as opposed to the orange dude. He gets in there and he reverts to 94 crime bill Biden. And this is a 180 from a 180 because remember, he was the chief architect at the federal level in the Senate with regards to the throw people in prison for simple drug possession shtick. There are people in the Supreme Court punted on a case that was going to be dovetailed with weed cases. Trump started this, by the way. This is Trump's reform of something Biden imposed. You remember, Trump started a program, the First Steps Act, I believe it was called, so that people that had been put in prison for extended periods because of minor crimes under mainly drug-related laws, now they could get out. Now this was mainly billed for marijuana users because marijuana is a drug, but it's not crack cocaine. There was somebody who had a little crack, just like a couple grams more than the allowable decriminalized or non-felony limit, and still has to serve the rest of his sentence. I think it was a 6-3 from the SCOTUS because that wasn't part of the arrangement, part of the bill. I'm thinking to myself, come on, dude. Don't split fucking hairs. Drug is drug, or should be for the classification purposes. Vermont, meanwhile, decriminalizing small amounts of buprenorphine, of all things. In Portland, you can have heroin, and in Colorado, I think it's in Denver, they decriminalize shrooms. Yeah, take these shrooms. You had a little too much crack, though, so you stay in Maxi. You stay in the Fed. It's horseshit. And Biden is horseshit, too. And by the way, they know they're lying. This is just for politically grifting purposes. They're trying to pull a switcheroo. They're trying to hoodwink the population by telling a lie over and over and over and over again. It's sort of like when they use the term bipartisan infrastructure bill. Well, it's a lie. It's not bipartisan. 99% of the Republicans oppose it. You got Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney on board. That's not bipartisan. That's just taking your fellow Democrats into your fold. That's about all. Peace out.